Good afternoon. It is Friday. It is after 2:30. Apologies, we had a few technical difficulties, so if you're waiting, excited to be with you. Josh Askvig, State Director for AARP in North Dakota. With me as always, Janelle Mose.
Hey,
How are you?
I'm good.
So
I'm good.
last week you started this conversation saying 2 weeks
Yes.
to go. We now have 1 week.
Yeah,
to
not
go.
even a full week. We only really have three days. Their hope is to get out of here by Wednesday after the floor
of next
session.
week.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
So all things advocacy with AARP North Dakota. Great to be with you. And we're going to talk a little bit about what has happened this week. It is that time of the session, based on our conversations anyway, and my prior experience up there, where things move in fits and starts. And so there's a lot happening at the Capitol. They have a ton of bills they're trying to finish and plow through and get through. And a lot of times there are issues that we're not totally paying attention to. And so sometimes you're just hanging out, waiting for things to happen. And then when things happen, they happen really, really, really fast as part of it. So let's maybe talk about what happened this week as part of it. I know that there was, that looks interesting. Again, technical difficulty. We've been having technical difficulties all over today as part of it. But I know you've been spending a lot of time in the appropriations committees this week.
Yeah, I think you're right. Right now, as of this morning, there were still 17 bills that the House Appropriations Committee had to act on before they even get to the floor. So, I mean, things come and go, but again, they move so quickly. So this week we were watching the insulin bill that was up in appropriations, as well as the two pension bills that we've been watching super closely, House Bill 1040 and Senate Bill 2339.
Mhm.
Yes, that's what it is. So those numbers, if you notice that my eyes kind of glazed over there, we have numbers in our head and they
Yeah.
move around, and so apologies that number was really slow coming out of my mouth. But again, a lot of really important conversations are happening in appropriations. They're trying to make decisions on priorities, like what's important to them right now, and some of it's just a placeholder, holding it, knowing that it's going to go over to the other chamber and they'll make decisions on that side of the chamber, and then they'll have to at some point in time meet in the middle and find a place that they all agree on where they want to invest the state's resources.
So, and I know you touched on this a little bit, but really the big things that we've been following in terms of our four priorities: prescription drug pricing, helping prevent fraud and consumer and elder abuse, pension protection or retirement security protection, and then last but certainly not least, around home and community-based services. Really, the big two that we've seen significant movement on this week were the insulin bill. And so maybe you want to talk about the insulin bill, which was Senate Bill 2140. Did I get that right? Yeah, see, we're jumbling these all up. So before you talk about that, Marty, why don't you just take the slides down and maybe see if you can reload them. Apologies if you're watching it. I know they're blue on the screen. That is not your screen. That's on our end as part of it. Go ahead, Janelle.
So 2140, which was the insulin cap bill. And again, if you remember from last week, we talked about the amendments that were considered and adopted by the Senate. It went in front of appropriations. What was a really great conversation about, this is a place to start. It's looking at how do we cap insulin at $25, as well as those supplies that folks need. The Senate Appropriations Committee overwhelmingly supported this concept, and it went back to the full Senate. And there were only a handful of senators that didn't support it. So this is a huge win. It's a big step forward that we can start to, whittle away at some of those high costs, especially for folks that need this. And it's a life or death, medicine that most of these folks need. So it's on its way over to the House. It's a big step forward for folks on this side. So
absolutely, and it's something, if you want to see some sort of prescription drug movement this session, we encourage you. Senate Bill 2140. Now you need to start reaching out to your members of the House of Representatives, because as Janelle just said, that's where that bill will go. The other issue we saw movement on this morning was around the pension bills. And so maybe we should just take a minute, because I don't think we've spent a lot of time here. There's kind of two prevailing approaches to this. And so let's talk about the Senate approach first. And that is primarily been around Senate Bill 2239. Okay, Janelle and I are going to do this all day, and we're trying to get practiced up for the legislative halftime or legislative lowdown report that we're going to do at the end of the month here. For Senate Bill 2239, Senator Sean Cleary out of Bismarck has introduced this bill. It essentially injects some state funding into the fund to help shore up some of the actuarial shortfall, and then it also makes adjustments to how those contributions are made into the fund. That's a bill. Where have we been on that bill?
We've been supporting that bill. I think all along, legislators and all of you know that we want to make sure that folks are currently in that retirement system can have their benefits available to them, or those folks that are nearing retirement, that the defined benefit stays intact, that we find a way to fund it. That's been something that we've been talking about even since the last legislative session. We've been just constantly reminding legislators this is an important issue, and folks want to keep their benefits that are available to them. And so this bill that was introduced in January has gotten some legs in the Senate, and there's a big conversation happening in the Senate that there is groundswell of support to keep that defined benefit intact for state employees.
So where's Senate Bill 2239 as of today? In fact, there was just action this morning on this bill.
A lot of action this morning. We've been sitting and waiting for action on this bill, and so it was heard in the Employee Benefits Committee this morning at bright and early at 7:30 in the morning. So for those of you that wonder what I do while I drive my kid to school in the morning, I listen to legislative hearings while I drive, and my son just rolls his eyes. But they took action on that bill. It got a favorable recommendation from the Employee Benefits Committee this morning. That was at 7:30. By 9 o'clock this morning, that bill was heard in Senate Appropriations. So again, this is when things can move super quickly, but the Senate Appropriations Committee supported that bill. So you're going to see that bill on the floor probably Monday or Tuesday next week. So, when we get to it later on today, that's something we want to really encourage folks to reach out to their senators about.
So that's what's happening on the Senate side, and we want to encourage folks to reach out to your senator. We'll talk about that more in just a second on Senate Bill 2239. The House of Representatives has so far, at least in the bills we've been covering, taking a little bit different approach. And so I believe it's House Bill 1040. Yep. Okay. We know these numbers, but right now there's just so many things swirling. It just takes a minute. House Bill 1040 is a bill that takes a little bit different approach. It closes the existing defined benefit, i.e. Social Security-like plan for new state employees going forward, and would replace it with a defined contribution or 401k-like plan. It does put some money into the fund in terms of helping to shore up that existing unfunded liability as a result of the stock market crash in the mid 2000s as part of it. But we still have concerns about this bill, yes?
Yeah, we still do. And this is the bill that was studied during the interim by the Retirement Committee. It's got a lot of support in the House for this bill, but this is something we've been planting our flag saying, yes, we understand that you're saying it's going to protect benefits for folks that are currently retired or nearing retirement. But again, when you start to make changes to those plans, there are still concerns that how do you make sure you have enough funding available to cover your current liabilities? And that's where we're saying, those folks have earned those benefits, and we want to make sure that they're there for the long term. But this bill, it's moving forward right now.
Yeah.
So,
and there's also a fiscal case to be made against 1040 in terms of it's actually going to end up probably costing the state more money long term by making that switch as part of it. And so it's something we're not supporting. 1040. There was action on 1040 today as well.
Yeah, that was kind of sandwiched right in between the Senate bill, but the House Appropriations Committee did take that bill up. They did committee work on Monday afternoon and considered another amendment to that bill, but they did vote it out of committee. It did receive a favorable recommendation, but it was a really close vote. So you can tell even on the Appropriations Committee in the House, there's not consensus about if this is the right decision. So I think, it's going to lead to a very long conversation on the House floor, but it is coming up with a favorable recommendation, but it's close vote.
So. Well, when you told me what the vote was, I was actually a little surprised as part of it. And so again, we support Senate Bill 2239. We're opposed to House Bill 1040. Other than that, the human services budget, we've been watching a number of different pieces that we won't get into a lot of detail here. That's moving forward as well?
Yeah, the Human Resources section, which is chaired by Senator Dever from here in Bismarck, they were digging into some of the details and making some adjustments to what the governor had recommended versus what they're seeing as priorities for them as the Appropriations Committee. The full committee started to dig into the details of that Human Services budget. That was probably late this morning, but they'll get into that more a little bit on Monday, and then we'll see them take action on that full bill in the Senate probably Monday or Tuesday next week. So
awesome. So next week, we're essentially next week we're headed to crossover. So let's just remind folks that we talk about crossover because we know it is, but let's maybe just remind folks what is crossover. That kind of signals what for the legislature.
So for our folks that love sports, it means it's the halfway point. Yeah. All bills have to be officially voted on. Final votes have to happen by Friday. So it's the point in time that all the bills that were introduced in the House or introduced in the Senate have been voted on, been heard in committee. They'll have to cross over to the other House for consideration in the second half. But essentially, it means halftime.
It's the halftime of the session is part of it until we get to the completion of the second half, and then comes the overtime period of conference committees. But we got plenty of time to do that. So next week, we're essentially just watching 2239, 1040, Human Services budget. We're still watching the Attorney General's budget because of some enhancements to the Medicaid fraud unit in there. We're also still watching, I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you've been paying super close attention to the Industrial Commission budget because there's some money for the Housing Incentive Fund around housing issues that we've supported. So there's lots of stuff we're watching, but in terms of most of it, we're just kind of waiting for action as part of it. Anything else for next week?
No, it just looks like a lot of long days on the House or the Senate floor. Like I said, there's just a handful of bills left in committees, mainly just the money, trying to figure out, where to put the funding and the resources. But it'll be a lot of floor sessions, almost all day sessions that they'll go into really details of the last budget. So.
Awesome. And I believe you said they're trying to get out of there by Wednesday.
Yep.
The
official date is Friday. I don't know. I think it'll be a late night. If they
Okay.
do it on Wednesday, it'll be super late. That's their goal. I think a lot of details still have to be worked out on some of these very significant, budgets, health department, human services budget, and then those pension bills.
Yeah.
You got competing priorities in the Senate and House, and those are going to take some really, really detailed conversations to iron that out before they gavel out for the crossover.
So what do we want folks to do in the meantime? We want them to tell their representatives what and senators what.
So vote red on House Bill 1040 and vote green on Senate Bill 2239. Those are the two bills that are left to take action, and that's a time for you to weigh in to say, these are priorities for me or for my family members. We know that it's important to maintain those benefits if you're on that defined benifit.
Just because I'm sure somebody might ask, we're spending a lot of time talking about 1040 and 2239. 2012, which is the Human Services budget, important for us. We've mentioned it as well. Why aren't we encouraging people to vote, to tell their senator how to vote on that one? I mean, essentially, that will be very rarely, it has happened, but very rarely do they kill agency budget bills.
It's very rare. They might get on. So on the Senate side, which is different than the House side, there can be floor amendments. So if a senator has a priority they don't see in the budget, they can offer a floor amendment. But 9 times out of 10, they know that both the section of the human, it goes through the human resources section of the appropriations, and the entire Senate Appropriations Committee have dug into the details, and they really trust the committee and trust that the work has been done in those committees, and so it's very rare that those bills don't get pretty much all green votes on the floor.
So this is also our cue to you who have been watching us and following along and paying attention to this. We will not be here next Friday. We're going to take next Friday off as well. Hopefully the legislature will be wrapped up for crossover by then. We're going to take next Friday off as well because on Monday the 27th, we're actually doing the legislative lowdown, which is our update on what's happened thus far in the session on issues impacting adults 50 and older. As part of it, you can learn more at aarp.org/ND events. I will just tell you right now, we already have wait lists in Bismarck and West Fargo. But if you register and get put on the wait list, even if we can't get you into the event, we'll make sure we're able to share that information out with you that we share. We still have space in Minot and Grand Forks as part of it. So if you're able to join us, aarp.org/ND events. Janelle, anything you want to cover? I want to ask you this question. Overall, your impression in terms of our priorities. You know our priorities very well. You're spending every day up there right now. And I want to give a huge shout out to Janelle. I actually haven't been at the Capitol in over 10 days, and it has everything to do with she's doing excellent work for all of us. It doesn't mean I haven't been engaged. I've been paying plenty of attention. Janelle can tell you, she gets texts from me all the time about what's happening, so-and-so, but I haven't actually had to physically go up there because she's done such a nice job on your behalf. As part of it. But what's your overall impression and take thus far, knowing we still have these issues hanging out there, and we are going to give a full breakdown during our legislative lowdown. But as of Friday, February 17th, I think it's legislative day, like what, 2024 or something like that, somewhere in there, part of it. Your takeaway so far in terms of issues impacting adults 50 and older?
You know, I think we're looking really good right now for where we're at in the legislative session. Obviously, there was a big disappointment that 2031, our big prescription drug bill, didn't pass, but we saw a huge win for folks that need insulin and access to affordable insulin. So I think that's a big win. We weighed in early on that bill. And we made sure we reached out to all of you, and there were a handful of you that reached out to your senators and encouraged that final vote. So that's a big win for us. On the fraud side of things, that bill regarding victim restitution, this was a bill that we hadn't even anticipated coming up this legislative session, but that was a big win. And overwhelmingly, the Senate saw this as a huge step forward in helping fraud victims. You know, the two other priorities for us in terms of the pension and the home and community-based services, those are still kind of yet to be determined, but we're in good shape. You know, we've been part of the conversations. There's a lot of details that have to be ironed out yet, but overall, I think we're looking pretty good right now for this point in the session. So.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's just important for folks to know and understand that on every single priority issue, we have either something still alive for the second half of the session or something well on its way to being alive for the second half of the session. We never take anything for granted, but I think we're in very good shape. And that's a kudos to all of you who have paid attention and weighed in. Again, I want to give a shout out to you, Janelle. I've been very proud of the work that we've done in your leadership and getting us through that. So as part of that, with that, we've gone 17 minutes. It is Friday, February 17th. This has been another All Things Advocacy.